What if you have kids who are in their 20s, they're kind of out of your house, and they've walked away from Christianity? How do you reach them? What do you do? Well, here are a couple suggestions. Of course, number one, you got to be praying for them. You pray regularly for them and plead with God that He would do a work in their life. But number two, on your end, I think what I would do is I would focus more on asking them questions. I've seen parents who are distraught and want to see their kids come to Christ, but they're older, and what they end up doing is kind of preaching at them and really kind of going after them, and it ends up creating this real kind of defensive situation where the kids are like, hey, back off. And so what I would do is to kind of prevent that is to ask questions. So ask them what they believe and why they believe it. Find out what they believe about God. What do they believe about Scripture? What do they believe about who Jesus was? And then ask them why they believe the things they do. And then listen patiently. I think that's a huge tip that we parents need to take to heart, is that we need to be patient. And we need to listen, really listen, and not, when our student says something that we disagree with, every single point that we disagree with, we don't have to let them know at that moment. But create space in your relationship with them where they can feel safe to have these conversations, because you ultimately want them to have these conversations with you. But if you don't create kind of the space and the freedom for them to be able to kind of get those things out on the table without you getting defensive or you getting upset or you jumping all over their case or you jumping on them with apologetics or something like that, then you're not going to be the safe place that they're going to be able to have these conversations. You're not going to be able to have these conversations with you. So ask them questions and then dignify them and they're adults, dignify them and listen to them and hear what they have to say. And maybe in those first, conversations, you just spend your only goal is to find out really what they believe and why they believe it. And then maybe you say something like, hey, okay, I hear you. I've been listening to you. I've been thinking about what you've been saying. Can I offer you some thoughts on that? And hopefully if you've done your job of listening well and being patient, then that will hopefully open them up to then maybe getting some input from you. And in the whole process, you got to be patient. I think you've got to expect that this process, these kind of conversations, this dialogue, may take a year, 2 years, 5 years. So the goal of every conversation isn't to preach the gospel to them. That's the ultimate goal for their life, is to have them embrace the gospel, to embrace Christ. But the goal of each conversation is just maybe to listen, is to eventually give them some things to think about, put a stone in their shoe, so that hopefully you can be an influence on them, even in their late 20s or beyond, and God can use you to bring them back to Christ. The other thing you could do is maybe find some people who they listen to or respect, who are believers, who would sit down with them, who would have conversations with them, who would interact. And because sometimes the family thing, the family dynamic, gets really defensive, gets pretty tense. I know from experience, and so it's always good to have somebody else, a third party. Sometimes the third party could maybe be a book, even. So you say, hey, I've been thinking about the questions that you have about Christianity. There's this really great book that I think explores these questions. Would you be interested in reading it? I'll buy it for you. And maybe you can use that book as kind of the third party. And then you start asking questions like, did you read the book? What'd you think? And then maybe that can create some more space for conversation.